Hello, more stories coming to you today, and this one is going to be about learning to sail. The sailing, for me, the sailing actually began in 1995 when I was addicted to casinos in New Mexico at that time, and I wanted to run away from New Mexico because I couldn't figure out any way to stop the addiction from happening. So I wanted to go someplace where there were no casinos. And I had to find something to do with my free time that was going to be as much fun and exciting for me as the gambling had been. So I spent some time one night thinking about what else I might be able to do and where I might be able to go do it. At the time I was a freelance paralegal, and I could do that just about anywhere. In those days, in 95, it wasn't as strict in terms of licensing everybody. Nobody ever asked me if I was licensed when I came to New Mexico and began work. And because I worked for an attorney that had a bipolar condition, and she left a lot of things in my hands that shouldn't have been in my hands, but because of that, I learned a lot about the law. And so I felt competent that I could go just about anywhere in the United States and do freelance paralegal work. So the issue was not how I would support myself. The issue was, what would I do with my time to get me away from the addiction? And so, as I'm thinking, I suddenly hit upon the idea of buying a sailboat and learning to sail it. And the idea of it was such an exciting idea for me. I have no idea why at the time, but I thought, yes, this is really what I want to do. This is going to fulfill me and thrill me and delight me and challenge me. And so I decided that night that that's what I was going to do. And so it involved selling my 10-acre piece of land up there, and then going down to Florida, which is where my mom and sis lived. I decided that would be the simplest place to learn to sail. There's a lot of very traversable water in the Gulf of Mexico. It will never be the Gulf of anything else but the Gulf of Mexico, in my opinion. And I did that. I moved down there, I just rented a little house that was directly on the Gulf. It had a small boat dock, and then I went looking for a boat. And I had no idea what to buy. I mean, I hadn't done any kind of research. I had, no knowledge about the different things that you could select. And the very first boat that I saw was a 22-foot O'Day. It was like a 1972 or something. And it was a nice little boat, so I bought it. And I had so much fun learning how to sail that thing. I had joined a local sailing club, and an old salt was trying to attach himself to me. He didn't have a boat, and the idea of going sailing with me appealed to him. But when he told me there could only be one captain on a boat, and I expect he meant himself, I decided I didn't need that much help. And so I'm going to figure out how to sail a boat. I mean, how difficult could it be, right? I mean, you hoist the sail, you point the boat in a direction, and you hope that the wind fulfills the sails. And so that's what I just took this boat, had a nice little 9-horsepower motor put on it. It was about 3,000 pounds, maybe a little bit less. And I went out into the Gulf with it, and it was a lot of fun. I had a really good time with this boat. I didn't have any marina nearby for me to bang my boat into. It was very easy to learn how to move around with it and to use the little outboard motor on it. Once I had it out in deep enough water, I lashed the tiller. It had a tiller, not a wheel, and to keep the boat pointed directly into the wind, which is what you need to do in order to raise the sail. And so I did that. I lashed the tiller, and then I quickly ran up to the deck and hoisted the sail, and then I did the jib, and then ran back down again. And I mean, I had a couple of misadventures with the boat, one of which I already talked about in another video, where I ended up swimming after my boat in order to catch up with it, because my landlubber guests hadn't thrown me the line so I could tie it up, and the wind just took it and blew it away from the dock with them on it. But that was my little 22-foot O-Day, which was not a problem for me to learn how to sail. And at that time, I still did not know about this character Fritz, my reincarnational ancestor, my immediate direct reincarnational self, who had been a merchant marine, a job that he had taken on at the age of 15, and he was a consummate sailor. But I didn't know that. I didn't realize that maybe my excitement about sailing came from Fritz. Anyway, I decided I just couldn't stay in Florida. The humidity, the heat, the bugs, and the people, too many rednecks, I think. It was just too much for me, and I ended up coming back to New Mexico. I ended up getting back into the casinos, and then right around the time that I started law school, I really had to make a decision about that. I could not be a good lawyer and be an addicted gambler both at the same time. It wasn't going to work. And so then I saw a professional, a psychologist, and we spent several months digging into my life and the things that were triggers for me. And thanks to her help, I did manage to finally lay that addiction to rest. And that was over 20 years ago now, so I'm very happy about that. But there came a point in my life, I had been a lawyer maybe 11 years, a paralegal maybe 18, close to 30 years altogether of being around the law, and a lot of time spending sitting in chairs, sitting at a desk, and my back was beginning to get curled. My arms, they're still flabby. I haven't fixed that yet, but I'm trying. So I decided, you know what, this law business, it's okay financially, but it's probably not the healthiest, because you have a lot of anxiety connected with it. There's a lot of things you have to remember to do. You have to do them timely. You're always under a lot of pressure. And so towards the end of 2017, I really thought I really need to do something different with my life that doesn't have me sitting so much. And I thought again about sailing, how much fun that had been, what a good time I had had. And I thought, why don't I buy a boat big enough for me to live on, and then I can write books, and I can go sailing. And so that seemed like a really fine idea, and then I had to go look for the boat. And unlike the first time where I just bought the first boat I saw without doing any kind of research, this time I spent months actually thinking about what I wanted in a boat. One of the questions had to do with the keel. The boats that go offshore, they tend to have the full keel going front to back, and the boats that mostly sit at the dock or stay close to home, they have short, small keels and are much more maneuverable. Then there was the question of an anchor, and I wanted one that was electronically lifted, because I have been in 4 auto accidents and my back would not like having to lift a heavy anchor up. So I wanted that. Then I wanted it to have a composting toilet, because I had read horror stories about standard boat toilets and what happens when they go bad. And they really go bad, and they're very stinky and they're very awful. And I'm not mechanically inclined, so I wanted something simple to operate. So it had to have one of those. And I didn't really care that much about a wheel as opposed to a rudder. I didn't care that much about different electronic things that it might have. But the boat I ended up buying, and there's a photograph of it behind me there. It's a Morgan Out Island. It was a 28-footer. a 9,000-pound boat, and it was located in Masalea Bayou. I'm sure I am completely mutilating the name of it. Marcelino. Anyway, it was in Panama City in this very small marina. We had maybe 30 boats in that marina altogether. But there were boats all around me, and this thing weighed 9,000 pounds, and so I was really freaked out about it. After I bought it and moved on to it, I wouldn't take it away from the dock because I was terrified of doing something wrong and hitting other boats with it. And I had to overcome that fear. And fear is a terrible, disabling kind of emotion. It just keeps you kind of moribund. It keeps you feeling bad about yourself, and you don't make good progress as long as you give in to the fear. So I had to first deal with that, and I did that by taking a couple of classes, ASA, American Sailing Association classes, and then I hired one of the instructors to help me get into being able to take the boat away from its dock. And this instructor taught me that when I come back, because the boat had so much prop kick, it wouldn't just back up straight, it would twist sideways as it backed up. So he said, just grab a hold of the nearest pylon and maneuver your way in, kind of pull your way in with ropes and things. And so this is how I learned to dock my boat. It was very inelegant, it was very labor intensive, but I did manage finally then to take the boat away from the dock, initially just out into the fairway or the waterway and back again, out and back again. And it wasn't until my son's birthday that year in July that I actually took the boat out into St. Andrews Bay, which is a very beautiful bay that Panama City has, and hoisted both sails. And there I was finally, for the first time since I had bought the boat in April, I think it was, that I was sailing it. So it had taken me months and months, you know, building up my courage before I could take that boat away from the dock. And then the man from whom I bought it, whom I now call my Florida son, Joe Dutton, he kept seeing me make a hash of docking the boat, and he said, why don't I go out with you a few times and we'll see if, you know, you can improve this. And I was very happy to have him out with me. He taught me about anchoring. He taught me a whole lot of, he's an amazingly good sailor, Joe Dutton. And after I was out with him a few times, I felt braver. And so I decided one day I would do this run up the coast with the boat, solo sailing. And I went up to, where did I go up to? St. Joe's, I think it was. Yeah, St. Joe's. St. Joe's is only like about 35 miles away from Panama City, but you have to spend an hour, first of all, getting out through the bay to get into the Gulf, and then you have to spend another hour when you come back on the other end. And so it ends up being more like 50 miles, actually, or even 60 one way. And I was going to do this. I had decided, you know, I had got myself some provisions, and I was going to have my first overnight experience. And the picture that's directly in back of me over here, my smiley face, I had managed to do my first solo sail up the coast. It took me hours and hours to do it. The wind happened to be nicely on my beam side, which made it very easy to sail the boat. And I was so pleased with myself when I had finally managed to get to this place and put the anchor down. And I'm sitting there, I'm about to have my dinner. And now in the morning when I brought the anchor back up again, I discovered that the ground in which it had rested was like poop. It really stunk. The anchor smelled really, really badly. And so in order to wash that stuff off of there, as I started back home, I put the anchor up and down a few times and managed to cause the surge protector to shut off the electricity to the anchor. And so there it was. It was kind of dangling a little bit off the front end as I continued along, but I managed to make it back safely, and I was very, very pleased with myself having done that. And my actual goal was to go down to the Virgin Islands with this boat. And in order to do that, I hired a captain to help me. But there were so many things about this boat that I just simply couldn't grasp, or didn't want to grasp, or didn't want to extend myself enough to grasp. And one of those things was the electrical system that it had. It had radar, and I wasn't quite sure how to even set it properly. I had all kinds of GPS systems on the boat that were part of the boat. I had a screen that showed me where the channel was, where the buoy markers were, where different landmarks were. I mean, the boat had so much. But if anything went wrong on it, I was unable to fix it. And my Florida son Joe, he is an amazing mechanic. I mean, I think the man can just about fix anything mechanical, and he's that good at everything he does. And so as I was in Florida waters, with Joe not too far away, I would call on him to come and keep the boat in good shape, and he did an amazing job. At one point, he completely took the engine apart, every single piece of it, every screw, every bolt. He had it all in all different kinds of little plastic baggies labeled. He cleaned everything up. He replaced the things that needed to be replaced. And the boat was in really good shape when I took off for the Virgin Islands in it. But it took 3 weeks of sailing to get there. And we used the engine the entire time, in addition to the sails, because we were going in a southeasterly direction, and that is mostly where the prevailing winds were coming from during this time. It was November. We left around the Thanksgiving. We left around a couple of days before Thanksgiving. Arrived in Marathon Thanksgiving, and then we arrived in the Virgin Islands December 22nd. So I got there, and it was my dream to be on this boat in these incredibly enchanting waters of the Virgin Islands. But once I got there, the automatic steering had failed during the last couple of days of our coming down. It had a rubber band that had broken, that had to be replaced, and there were other things that needed to be looked at. And unfortunately, the mechanics that I ended up with, they were not great mechanics. The good ones down there were working on the big boats, and so things got worse on my boat instead of better, and I really couldn't even take it away out sailing without that fixed, because you have to keep the boat pointed into the wind. And this one had a steering wheel, and so in order to do that, I really had to have the automatic pilot working. So I never took the boat sailing while I was down there. I had a really good time being in the Virgin Islands, getting to know the people. I started to write my second book, but then after a while I just thought, I'm a liability in these waters. If my boat is not repaired, and if these electrical problems that the last guy created persist, I could end up blowing up my boat, and a bunch of other things with it around here. And so, let's see this. I am going to get the sun right now, I guess. Anyway, my boat dream came to an end because of my own mechanical, electrical shortcomings. And if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't, because I'm either going to have to learn how to be a plumber, an electrician, a mechanic, or just don't do it. And in this lifetime, I cannot see myself expanding into those particular areas. So chances are I will not be doing this kind of boat adventure again, although I am still keen to sail, and I will be sailing with other people. But that's my boat stories, and it was a dream. It was a really important dream that I had. And I feel as though even though I didn't get to do it for extended periods of time, I'm really happy that I gave myself the opportunity to live this dream. And I think we need to follow our hearts, even when they lead us into very, very strange places, and I have always been known to follow my heart. So wishing you guys a great week. Let's keep our eye on what's going on in Washington. And yes, do not play dead. Do not roll over and pretend it's not happening. Make noises. As Mr. Lewis said, get into some good trouble. Alright, take care, guys.